I'm thrilled that you're joining me here. My name is Marilyn Evans. I'm the founder of Parents Aware and host of the Media Savvy Moms podcast, the podcast that is leading the conversation about parenting and pornography today. Hello, everyone. We are back with Media Savvy Moms, and today we're talking about how porn culture is impacting our schools and our youth, and how to confront that with the best defense we have, which is education. And that comes from Liz Walker, who is our guest today. She is an accredited sexuality educator, speaker, and author. Her principal role is Managing Director of Youth Wellbeing Project, and that is an organization based in Brisbane, Australia, but it has global vision and reach. They have books and resources and whole school programs with an eye for educating on the harms of pornography, building resilient kids, and equipping families for tricky conversations. She regularly provides consultancy to government, nonprofit, and professional organizations. So you can tell why we love having Liz on the show. She just speaks to all the things that we love and care about. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Melody and Liz to give us some more information about what we're doing today.
Yes, welcome to the show, Liz.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
So we are associated with Liz through the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. We've hung out a little bit in Washington, D.C. at some international summits, and it's just really good to have you on the show with us. But our audience doesn't know you yet. So talk to us a little bit about you, who you are, some of the projects you've been involved with, and tell us about how you first got involved challenging school curriculum.
Wow, that's a lot of questions to answer. Like, my life has been just flat out go since 2010 and 11. I did a master's in health science and sexuality, or Master of Health Science in Sexual Health. And I literally felt when I was at university that I was living in some sort of parallel universe, because they were celebrating the wonders of porn. And my story is that I saw porn when I was the age of 6, and it drastically impacted my life. I ended up mimicking or copying those behaviors and engaging in child-on-child sexual abuse. And, you know, I learned my script from the from pornography. And so that had profound impacts on my life. From that day forward, the trajectory of my life changed. So when I was at university and they were saying porn is wonderful, I'm like, have you read the World Association for Sexual Health Declaration Goals? Because that talks about, you know, the world shall be free from violence, and, you know, and pornography is promoting that. So
right, you're coming at it from personal experience and education, like, hello, people, right?
Exactly. So I started to really wrestle with that. I'm like, how can I find my voice in this space that just seems to be a little, you know, I'm all for healthy sexual relationships, but this is a whole nother level to celebrate pornography when I know that so many women are exploited and so many children are harmed. And so, yeah, it took me a little while to find my voice, but I started with sex education curriculum, or sexuality and relationships curriculum, publishing my first curriculum in 2011. And you know, that we go into schools, we speak in schools. I've had various times over the years where we've been more busy than others. But, you know, then in 2015, I had a group of people in Canberra approach me and say, look, you know, we really want to do something about the impact of pornography in Australia on Australian kids. And I joined with that group and started to plan for a summit in 2016, which was the Porn Harms Kids Summit. And that came together really quickly. We had over 200 people. We had over 30 media articles at the time. And it was really got this issue on the table, that along with a Senate inquiry.
Right.
And at around the same time in 2017, I started to work with Dr. Gail Dines. So at the same time as I was taking on a new role with Culture Reframed as Director of Health Education, I was also co-founding a charity, which at the time was called Porn Harms Kids and then became eChildhood.
Yeah, that's when I met you. Yep.
That's right. That's right. So I'm now no longer with eChildhood. I've left that in the capable hands of the executive director there, Tamara Newlands, and I'm now also forming another charity in Canada, which is called Connecting to Protect, because we want to take the lessons that we've learned here in Australia from a public health approach and apply that globally, really helping countries implement age verification. So prior to leaving eChildhood, I was very involved in another inquiry. We put in a really solid response to that inquiry and became integral in informing the government. We were at the hearing on age verification. So the Australian government has handed down 6 recommendations to implement age verification, but they're taking their time about it.
Sweet time. Yep.
Yes. And all through that time, I've was actually a relief to resign from eChildhood, because then I could really dive back in and focus on our schools education, which is what we're here to talk about today. So I've had my
Yay.
finger in a lot of pies. I've written children's books. I've got 2 children's books to equip parents. I've got a team of volunteers that come along and help me. Some, if they're speaking in schools, they're obviously paid. But yeah, people say, "How do you do it?" And I'm like, less sleep.
We hear ya. Oh, beautiful work. Beautiful work. And what a story. I mean, you are the picture of really trauma turned into energy to make change in this world and to fight the evils and the awful and build hope and then to ignite that in others. And we love that. And that's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here to talk about today. So, moving on, sex ed is a pretty polarizing topic, right? It gets people pretty fired up one way or the other. People are for it and they're against it. They are all for teaching only in their homes. They think that the school should be the one to do it, right? Everybody has really strong opinions about it. Or, some people, I don't know. Have you come across people who really don't care? And in my experience, people have strong feelings. How do you think that we can take something so heated and work together in harmony for the best interest of our students?
Yeah, look, I think there really needs to come a balance to what is provided, and I think there's real value in both sides trying to listen to one another. When I was in a university, I was really quite astounded actually at America in particular, because it's far more polarizing than any other location in the world. Literally on this topic, it's extremely polarizing. In Australia, there tends to be we're known for apathy. Should be right, mate. so,
No worries,
so
right?
yeah, no worries. It should be right. It's all good. So I think perhaps it's more polarizing in America, but I developed 7 principles of whole person centered sexuality education, because if we're going to deliver sexuality education, we really need to be thinking about the mental, emotional, spiritual well-being of our young people, and not be putting them at further risk. So, we've got 7 principles. I'll just quickly go through them. We
Mm.
recognize that valuing self and valuing others are essential pillars to building satisfying and equitable relationships. Um, Whole person sexuality education equips young people with accurate information to make proactive and healthy choices that enhance their physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, sexual, and relational well-being. It promotes empathy and relational boundaries, which enable young people to communicate respectfully across personal, cultural, and social differences. It prioritizes the prevention of sexual harms by building social and emotional intelligences. It positions pornography within an exploitive framework, critical porn analysis allows young people to explore the mechanisms driving the porn industry and its impacts on self, others, relationships, and culture. It understands that sexuality is influenced by internal and external forces and situated within a much larger complex model of personal identity. Sexuality interacts with the other areas of personal identity, such as self esteem, self confidence, and self expression. And it creates awareness that sexual integrity is valuing, developing, and expressing sexuality in ways that are non exploitive, mutually wanted, unifying, and life enhancing. Sexual integrity is foundational to meaningful and authentic connection. And that's exactly what we want our young people to have: meaningful
Right.
and authentic connection. And of course, people can have relationships outside of those bounds, but they're less likely to be satisfied in a meaningful way.
Right. When you present the argument that way, how do you argue against that? How do you say, "No, I don't want my child to be connected socially and mentally and spiritually," right? It's beautiful, beautifully done. It just unpolarizes us, doesn't it? It makes us all
Exactly.
puts us all on the same page.
Exactly. And we have to get beyond the us and them argument, because it's just clearly it isn't working.
Right.
And I think both sides need to solidly have a look at their perspectives and what is actually putting young people at risk. And unfortunately, many schools don't address pornography education, which is now where we have really turned our attention to developing curriculum for.
Let's get to that. Let's talk about that. So what is coming down the pipeline in our schools and what's already here? And talk to us about that term, porn literacy. What is that?
Porn literacy is something that everyone needs to listen for. If your school is delivering pornography literacy education, be careful and ask more questions about what that entails. There's a researcher in Ireland, and her name is Kate Dawson. And she has identified 8 core concepts for porn literacy education. Now, she says it's underpinned by critical thinking, but it's really interesting because I think there's not enough critical thinking applied.
Hmm.
Now, the first point that she is promoting is the one that we may need to be most concerned about, and then understand the rest of the points from that lens. She says that she wants to reduce shame and increase acceptability of pornography engagement. So what she's saying is she wants people to be more comfortable with the porn viewing.
Right.
So
And
that's really concerning.
and we're going to present this in classrooms. So yes, is this curriculum? So we're saying we want kids to grow up in a world where we're teaching them they want to be more comfortable watching porn. Yes?
Yes, that's what she's saying. Now, there are various media reports, and I haven't confirmed for certain Kate Dawson's explicit views on this, and that's an interesting choice of word, because apparently, according to some news reports, that she wants to show explicit content within the classroom, which of
Mhm.
course is so irresponsible. I mean, I've said before from the stage and platform that I can't think of anything worse than being an educator in a classroom with 25 horny teens, right?
Right.
That's really problematic. But
Yes.
essentially, if those advocating to show young people pornography, that would be what you're dealing with. It's so completely unethical and so completely unsafe.
And yet, this is a real thing. It's something we need to be watching out for as parents. If you were hearing this term, porn literacy, pornographic literacy education, yeah, watch
Yes.
out, be careful, right?
Exactly, exactly. So then the other 7 points that she talks about are actually not so bad in and of themselves. They're admirable goals, but when you've got that first point of normalizing pornography use
Mm,
to reduce shame, instead of helping young people identify, well, why is that shame there and
mm,
what's actually going on? Because usually shame can be a protective factor. If you're
mhm.
ashamed of something, it's because inherently you realize that there's something problematic with it. So these other 7 points are fairly admirable in their intention, except that it's coming from the wrong lens, in my opinion. Um, So discussion of sexual communication and sexual consent, absolutely essential. Body and genital image, again, that's a really important thing to discuss with young people about how pornography may make them feel in terms of, insecure about their own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The realities of sex, absolutely. Pleasure and orgasm, yes, we need to be talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Physical safety and sex, the role of pornography as an educator, and the sexualization and fetishizing of LGBT plus people. Now, all of that is really important to discuss. But in here, there's nothing about racism. There's nothing about exploitation or objectification. There's nothing about trafficking and the ways that
Mm-hmm.
pornography leans into trafficking. There's nothing about mental health or sexual function. It's a really it lacks insight and depth in terms of what it's proposing. It really misses out on that macro view that this is more than just young people engaging with pornography themselves. There is a public health crisis going on because of the ways that it's affecting the health and well-being of individuals, relationships, families, communities, and
Mm-hmm.
cultures.
Exactly. Exactly. We got to see the big picture, right?
Mm.
Uh, so we have a lot more to talk about. We're going to actually take a little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk with Liz about the alternative to this curriculum that's coming down the pipeline.
When parents share with me their concern over a child struggling with pornography, I always recommend they check out Fortify. Fortify is an amazing recovery tool that can help your teen learn to develop their own plan towards success. It's easy to sign up, it's designed to engage, and it's free for teens. Best of all, Fortify is science-based and has a proven track record of helping thousands of individuals find happiness by regaining their freedom from pornography. Visit joinfortify.com/media savvy moms to learn more.
And we're back, and we are talking with Liz Walker about porn literacy and all sorts of things that are going on in the schools. And we were talking about some scary stuff before the break, and now we are going to talk about coming at it from the other side with our families and our communities and fighting what's going on. So, what is the alternative, Liz? We know that you're into open, honest conversations, just like we are about healthy sexuality. What should we be seeking in the classroom, and how important is it that we address pornography with students, and what should that look like?
Okay, so just like porn literacy is a concept or a framework, it's not an actual curriculum. The curriculum builds off that framework. I've developed a framework called critical porn analysis, and that's really acknowledging it provides a reflective opportunity to consider how porn consumption or personal porn consumption facilitated and promoted by the porn industry contributes to a public health outcome. So
Hmm.
critical porn analysis is a much broader framework or a critique. I can send you the link so that your listeners have access to know what critical porn analysis is. But we talk about the impact of pornography on sexual desires and perceptions, sex, gender, power, and relationships, sexual exploitation and oppression, child sexual exploitation and development, mental health, addiction, and spirituality, physical health and functioning, and the fact that the global industry is driving all of this. So
Mm.
pornography is a much broader, has much broader implications than just what we're seeing with what porn literacy unpacks, and we have to take that broader approach for the
Hmm.
good of society. Um, so when
That's
it
that
comes
big picture that we were talking about, right? That was missing. We need to fill in the rest of the gaps, right? Perfect.
exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. So translating this to schools education, taking some time to consider, we're starting to frame this as porn and online safeguarding education
Okay.
because we want our kids to be safe, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And one of the things that I'm noticing is that we're just too nervous to talk about pornography in primary schools
Mhm.
when essentially a huge percentage, a third, maybe more, are seeing pornography in primary schools. So, up to 60%, 65% of boys are seeing porn by the age of 12. So
Mm.
we've got to have these conversations much earlier to
Right.
warn our children and prepare them to know what to do.
Absolutely. And what I love about your approach is that it's not this alarmist, okay, porn literacy is coming, let's fight it, and hoorah, we're fighting, no, no, bad, bad. Instead, you've come back with a healthy um, alternative and said, now let's fix it. And we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it a better way and a healthier way. So it makes me so happy to see not just anger and fighting, but then thinking. And like you said, working in that critical thinking and coming back with a solution of how to do it better. Beautifully done.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
how can we take all of this and these recommendations and adapt them to discussions in our home? And how can we get that translated from the classrooms back into what we're doing as family?
Okay, so first we need to understand what porn and online safeguarding education is, and that's in the home and in the school, but it's supporting children and young people to build critical literacy skills to minimize porn and other online harms, equipping them for well-being, including relationships that are safe, respectful, mutually pleasurable, and consenting. So, in the classroom, this might look like acknowledging the harms of porn within the online safety space, also acknowledging their mental well-being is impacted by pornography. Also looking at safeguarding and protective behaviours and relationships and sexuality education. So, porn and online safeguarding education fits in the centre of those four areas that are typically addressed quite easily in schools.
Mhm.
Online safety, unfortunately, though, at least in Australia, we've noticed that when we're talking about cyber safety, we often talk about inappropriate content
Uh huh.
without actually helping kids unpack what that is.
Right.
And what is inappropriate content to kids who have a hypersexualized wallpaper surrounding their lives?
Right. They're
So
more keen to talk about cyberbullying and protecting your password than getting into what pornography is, right? It's like,
that's
whoops, inappropriate content. What does that mean? What does that mean,
e-
right?
exactly. And so kids are left on their own because they're going, well, you don't know what I was watching last night, or, too scared to say that little Johnny showed me this in the playground the other day. Like, we're not having the conversations that we need to be.
Right. And
Um,
so how do we get the schools to wake up and make change and governments too to take proactive steps and to make this happen?
we have to be spelling it out for them. I mean, the disconnect between what's actually happening on the ground in schools and decision makers at the top end is so vast.
Mm.
Um, I think if there is, and I certainly don't mean to minimize the atrocities that have occurred through this COVID-19 period and the implications it's had on families, but I think if there's a gift, if I can put it this way, that COVID has given us, is that we are far more aware that children are at risk online.
Mhm.
Online grooming has gone through the roof, and we have to understand that grooming comes from um, people who have grown up groomed on porn, and then those normalized behaviors are then impacting our children. So we have to help people connect the dots. This
Right.
isn't just about a mass rise of online predators. This is looking at how pornography has groomed them in the first place and normalized predatory behavior because it's a
Mhm.
predatory industry.
Yes, absolutely. And again, you're speaking from personal experience and education and years of work in this industry. and sharing all of your beautiful insights and tips and helps with us. And we really appreciate it. So, where can we learn more about you and your programs?
I'm going to send you a whole bunch of links, but we've got the Youth Wellbeing Project website for schools, and we have a curriculum that's available for implementation anywhere in the world. If people want to contact me, we can help modify it for your particular country, which is very exciting. We have the Porn Resilient Kids website, which is where you'll find all the resources relevant to parents, including 2 of my children's books that are available on Amazon. That's Hamish and the Shadow's Secret and Millie's Message, which some of you may have heard as Not for Kids. It was first published under the name Not for Kids.
Yeah, I would remember that one. Great.
Yeah, so republished as Millie's Message.
Awesome.
So yeah, we've got 2 main websites where everybody can find us. And I would issue parents the challenge to go to their school and find out what their online safety education entails and what their protective education entails. Like, what are they teaching kids with safeguarding education? And in that, we can teach kids from a very young age that, your body is your own, that nobody gets to touch it. We can teach them to recognize their early warning signs so that when something is happening to them in the physical or online, that I've got these early warning signs, I need to go and talk to a safe adult.
Right.
And so we can begin that language with them very young, that if you ever see anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, but we have to lay the foundation. I say that if you haven't talked to your kids about sex by the age of 8, you're too late. So, not that we're ever too late. I want to preface that we're never too late to begin the conversation. But if we really want to give our kids a fighting chance and give them the skills that they need to combat the porn industry's intention, they're not putting any measures in to safeguard kids. So I can only presume that they mean to trap your kids and get them to watch porn, right?
We want to get there first, right?
We need to get there first.
That's the goal. That's what you're saying. Like, it's a race and we got to get there first.
Exactly. We've got to give them a fighting chance.
Yep,
so
absolutely. Be brave. Be brave. You got this. All right. So we're going to turn it over to Marilyn, and it's been so great talking. We could just go on for hours, but we've got a recap. So can you give us a little highlights, Marilyn?
I can try, but I am just so glad you gave us where to find your information because even I am just frantically writing down notes here. It's so jam-packed full of information. Thank you for sharing your personal story and how you understood from that first time on that university campus, the conversations that we're having out in society just are not in favor of our children and their development, and that you decided to do something about it. So just a quick recap of so much information is that we need to be aware of porn literacy. That sounds very noble, but it's misguided. And the first main point to be concerned of, whatever it's labeled at your school, whatever you're hearing happening in the classroom, and I can tell you, we did not have a porn literacy program at our school, but I do know that the schools in my area definitely taught some aspect of porn literacy, which is to normalize the use of pornography with the idea to reduce shame. And Liz explained how narrow-minded that is, and that there may be some aspects of that program which seem noble and good, but without the broader lens of what she has to offer, which is a critical analysis of porn, we do not have a big enough picture, and we are putting our kids at harm's way. So we have to acknowledge that 60 to 65% of boys have seen pornography by age 12. So we may be afraid to address this in our elementary school system. And certainly Liz pointed out that our policymakers are so far disconnected from what's actually going on the grounds, what's happening on the grounds in our schools. And so we need to bridge that gap. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And we're going to put a link to all of these wonderful resources. And thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today.
It's been my absolute pleasure. And I'm so glad that you're doing all the great work you're doing. Like, families absolutely need support with this. And we champion you from here in Australia.
Awesome. All right. So I think you already gave us a little hint to what the challenge is for our parents this week, but I want you to repeat it here at the end. Our challenge for our parents this week.
Find out what education your school is offering in terms of online safety and safeguarding education. And does that include any element of teaching kids what to do when they see pornography? It's really important. That's particularly more so important in primary schools. You could also find out what they're teaching about pornography and sexuality education, particularly as they move up the year levels, because it's not enough. And do they have the lens of how pornography is impacting mental health and sexual function? We're seeing some massive problems. So I can share this graphic with you to put on your website. I've got a full webinar coming up soon to unpack how to really dive in and press into schools. So but it's really important that we ask really pointed questions about that, because if we're not coming from the right lens, we're putting kids at risk.
Absolutely. Thanks again for joining us today, Liz.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for joining the conversation. If you'd like more information about what was discussed in this episode, visit our detailed show notes at parentsaware.info. And if you simply want to follow us on social media, we are at Media Savvy Moms on Instagram and parentsaware/Media Savvy Moms podcast on Facebook. Until next time, keep talking.